They say every Hollywood mansion has its secrets. But no one expected what agents discovered beneath Tracy Reiner's estate in the hills of Santa Barbara. Not the neighbors, not the press, not even the investigators who thought they'd seen it all. Because what they found wasn't just an extra storage room. It wasn't some dusty wine cellar or forgotten panic shelter. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It was a soundproofed, high-security vault, hidden beneath layers of concrete, masked by false blueprints, locked from within, and inside, documents, tapes, legal drafts, old contracts, code names, evidence, and a silence so loud, so unnerving, it made even the most seasoned FBI agents pause. But let me ask you this. What if I told you those files weren't just relics of an aging Hollywood dynasty, but pieces of a puzzle that linked directly to multiple sealed settlements with industry elites? What if I told you, without exaggeration, that what the FBI uncovered could lead to reopened investigations involving hush money, offshore accounts, and a web of silence so thick that even death couldn't break it? And here's where it all collides. Tracy Reiner, Rob's daughter, actress, producer, legacy bearer, the same woman who had largely stayed out of the spotlight, who had dodged scandals, who rarely gave interviews, and who now stands at the center of a federal investigation. Let that sink in. And now let me take you back just 6 days ago, when police received a 911 call from a distraught young woman who said, "There's someone dangerous, and he lives here." That woman, Romy Reiner, Tracy's niece, Rob's youngest daughter, the same woman who later walked investigators into a blood-slicked hallway at her parents' $13.5 million Brentwood estate and pointed toward the master bedroom. Within that bedroom, 2 bodies, stab wounds, no sign of forced entry, no witnesses. Just silence, broken only by the distant humming of a generator in the guest house. That guest house was occupied by Nick Reiner, Rob's troubled son, a recovering addict with a complicated past and a long history of family rifts. Nick was arrested hours later, barefoot, allegedly covered in scratches and dazed beyond reason. He's since been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. But this story is about more than just a murder. This story is about what happens when secrets refuse to stay buried, when power collides with paranoia, when legacy becomes liability, and when a family's fame hides something far more sinister. Because just one day after the Brentwood crime scene was cleared, an anonymous tip led federal agents to a 6-acre estate owned by Tracy Reiner. Officially, they were executing a search warrant linked to possible financial irregularities and a rumored trust fund discrepancy. Unofficially, they were chasing whispers of tapes, files, a vault under the house, the source allegedly said. She never let anyone near it. And to be clear, this wasn't some rumor passed over lunch in Studio City. This was backed by a sealed affidavit. The FBI came with dogs, drills, and a floor plan that showed no such room. But within hours, a cold draft led agents to a hollow section behind a wine rack. A secondary panel was discovered behind the far wall. And behind that, a descending staircase. 1 step, 2 steps, then concrete, soundproofed insulation, a biometric lock, no cell signal. That's when they realized this room was designed to stay hidden forever. And now you're probably wondering, what exactly was inside? Here's where things get even darker. Because the first thing agents found were rows of locked cabinets, each with labels written in code. But the contents? No code. Typed letters, legal drafts, transcripts, and some documents stamped with a seal no civilian should ever possess. Classified, restricted access. One folder contained a list of settlements, some dating back over 2 decades. Names redacted, but a few were missed. Familiar ones, powerful ones. There were audio reels, too, hundreds of them. One still loaded into a machine, mid-playback, when they entered. The tape was running, and the voice? Clearly male, familiar, calm, authoritative. One agent described it as a legal strategy meeting that never should have been recorded. And another folder, this one unlocked, was titled in bold ink, Sunset Clause, Do Not Destroy. And beneath it, an envelope marked for TR. Only. Let me ask you, what does someone like Tracy Reiner need with sunset clauses, sealed evidence, and legal tapes so sensitive they were never meant to exist? And what's worse, why store them directly beneath her home, hidden behind biometric doors? Was she protecting something? Or someone? And what happens when protection turns into participation? Because here's the contradiction. Tracy has never been linked publicly to any of her father's business controversies. She spent most of her career in independent cinema and modest productions. So why was her house used to store this level of information? Unless it wasn't just hers. Unless someone else trusted her enough to hide things where no one would think to look. But that raises even more disturbing questions. Was she hiding it? Or holding it for leverage? You see, power in Hollywood has never just been about fame. It's about silence. About knowing the right people. About knowing the wrong people. And keeping quiet at the right time. So here's the real chilling thought. What if this room beneath Tracy's estate is just one of many? What if it's part of a broader system? One that certain Hollywood families use to protect reputations, bury allegations, and clean up behind the scenes? And what if, despite the Reiners' public image as progressive, principled Hollywood icons, they were complicit in a deeper game? But here's where the story twists again. Because not all the files were decades old. Some were from last year. That's right. Recent. That means whoever was accessing this room was doing so after Rob Reiner's health had reportedly declined. So was it Tracy? Was it someone she allowed in? Or was someone else sneaking into that vault without her knowledge? And if that's the case, how long had they been watching? How long had the walls of that estate been hiding things that could bring entire careers crashing down? Now pause. Because you're probably thinking, surely, the FBI would have acted sooner if this was so explosive. But here's the contradiction. They couldn't. Many of the tapes, transcripts, and documents were sealed by private order, possibly as part of out-of-court agreements. That means they may have existed outside traditional evidence chains until now. Which brings us to the most haunting possibility of all. What if the murders of Rob and Michelle Reiner weren't random? What if they were preventative? What if someone knew the vault was no longer secure? And what if Tracy Reiner, knowingly or not, held the key to a secret so dangerous that people were willing to kill for it? Because make no mistake, this isn't just about a hidden room. It's not even just about the Reiners. It's about the question no one in Hollywood ever wants to ask aloud. What if the people we've idolized were hiding monsters behind soundproof walls? And the answer is what we're about to unpack, chapter by chilling chapter. Because in the next part of this story, we'll walk through the night of the murders, the blood, the timeline, the eerie silence, and the moment police realized someone in the family had lied. What if the killer didn't have to break in, because they were already inside? The sun had barely dipped below the Pacific horizon when Brentwood's wealthiest neighborhood fell into the kind of silence that feels wrong. You know the kind, too still, too perfect, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Inside the $13.5 million Reiner estate, all appeared calm from the outside. A perfectly pruned garden. Ambient lighting glowing from the driveway columns. Security cameras pointed outward, not inward. But by 8:46 p.m., everything inside that house had changed forever. Rob Reiner, 78, and his wife Michelle, 70, were both dead. Not of natural causes. Not even of an accidental overdose or domestic dispute. They were stabbed. Multiple times. No forced entry. No alarms triggered. And yet, blood pooled on the expensive Brazilian hardwood of the master suite floor. Sheets soaked. Pillows slashed. A shattered glass nearby suggested a struggle. But there were no broken windows. No signs of a scuffle in the hallways. No overturned furniture. It was, to be blunt, a surgical strike. Efficient. Up close. Personal. And that's where it gets disturbing. Because if someone wanted to kill Rob and Michelle Reiner that night, they didn't fight their way in. They were let in. Or worse, they never had to leave in the first place. Let's rewind just a bit. Earlier that day, Romy Reiner, Rob and Michelle's 27-year-old daughter, had reportedly visited the estate to drop off some old film reels for her father's archival project. According to early interviews with friends, she'd been in and out quickly, citing tension in the house. Tension? Apparently, there'd been a heated phone call between Rob and his son Nick earlier that week. Something about betrayal, according to a neighbor who overheard raised voices through an open patio. Now here's where things take a turn. Nick Reiner, 32, lived in the guest house on the same property. Not across town. Not in another city. On site. That means he was mere yards away the night of the murders. But his account of that night has already begun to unravel. According to his initial police statement, he claimed he was asleep early, then watched a movie, then later amended his story to say he went for a walk around the block. Suspicious? You have no idea. Because between 8:15 p.m. and 8:55 p.m., several critical things happened, none of which Nick seems able to clearly explain. A neighbor's outdoor camera picked up muffled yelling from inside the main house. Two distinct voices, one male, one female. At 8:34 p.m., Romy placed a call to a close friend. Her voice was shaken. She allegedly said, "I don't like this. Something's off with Nick." At 8:46 p.m., a silent alert was triggered on the estate's private network. A sensor tripped in the hallway leading to the Reiners' bedroom. It was never followed up on. By 9:02 p.m., Romy was back at the estate. And what she found was straight out of a nightmare. Let's pause here. Imagine being 27 years old, walking into your childhood home, and finding your parents lifeless. The kind of lifeless that makes you drop the phone. The kind of lifeless that doesn't need a pulse check. She reportedly screamed, collapsed, dialed 911 with trembling fingers. Her exact words, according to dispatch logs, "There's blood everywhere. I think it's my brother. He's dangerous. Please, please come now." And yes, you heard that right. She didn't say, "I don't know who did this." She didn't even say, "I think someone broke in." She said, "I think it's my brother." Those 6 words may haunt this case forever. Police arrived within 6 minutes. Body cam footage, currently under review, shows Romy outside on the front lawn, barefoot, shivering, wrapped in a throw blanket. Her eyes locked on the main house. Her lips trembling as she repeated, over and over, "He snapped. He finally snapped." Inside the house, first responders were met with the grisliest scene Brentwood had witnessed in decades. Rob was found face up on the bed, his hands clenched, mouth slightly open. Michelle was on the floor near the nightstand, as if she had tried to escape. No defensive wounds. No signs of a third-party entry. And only 2 fingerprints on the murder weapon, a kitchen knife found discarded in the bathroom sink. One set belonged to Rob. The other? Nick. But here's where things get tricky. Nick Reiner was found in the guest house, sitting on the edge of his bed, wearing a robe. He was calm, detached, like he was waiting. When officers questioned him, he reportedly mumbled something unintelligible about being provoked, and it had to happen. He did not resist arrest. He did not cry. He simply said, "Tell Romy I'm sorry." Then he asked for a lawyer. Let me ask you, does that sound like a man acting out of passion, or someone who expected this? Someone who may have known the consequences in advance. But wait, here comes the first major contradiction. When police reviewed security footage from the estate, something didn't add up. The camera positioned on the east wing hallway, facing the direction of the Reiner's bedroom, went black at 8:32 p.m. for precisely 24 minutes. Then, it came back online at 8:56 p.m., 1 minute before Romy made her 911 call. Coincidence? Or sabotage? Now here's the kicker. When technicians retrieved the footage, they discovered something else. The deleted segment hadn't just gone missing. It had been manually overwritten. That requires admin access. And guess who had that access? Nick Reiner. And yet, friends of Nick are saying something different. They claim he'd been in a good place lately. Sober for over a year. Working on a screenplay. Attending family dinners. Playing the devoted son. So what changed? Why that night? Why that level of violence? That's the question investigators are still trying to untangle. Because if this was premeditated, it doesn't match the Nick they knew. If it was spontaneous, why the camera deletion? Why the precision? And perhaps most disturbingly, why did Romy immediately suspect him? Let's dig even deeper. Sources close to the family say Michelle had expressed concern over Nick's behavior in the weeks leading up to the murder. She reportedly confided in a friend that he had become obsessed with something his father was hiding. That same friend, who asked to remain anonymous, said Michelle once told her, "He keeps asking about the old tapes. The legal stuff. He thinks Dad made a deal that ruined everything." Legal stuff? Tapes. You see the connection now? Because this is where our story overlaps with the vault. The secret room. The classified documents and audio reels found beneath Tracy Reiner's estate just days later. Could Nick have found out about it? Could he have believed Rob was hiding something monumental and wanted to confront him? Or was he being manipulated? What if someone fed him just enough information to push him over the edge? What if the murders weren't about rage, but strategy? To silence, to reset the narrative, to stop someone from leaking the truth. Here's a haunting final detail from that night. When officers returned to the guest house the next morning to search for Nick's personal effects, they found something under his mattress. A spiral notebook, filled with scribbled notes, diagrams, names. At the very bottom of the last page, written in red ink, "The room is real, and it's not empty." No signature, no explanation, no context, just that one final sentence. So now we're left with the ultimate question. Did Nick Reiner kill his parents because of a twisted personal vendetta? Or because he got too close to a secret someone else didn't want him to uncover? Because what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the night of the murders wasn't the beginning of this story, but the end of a war that had been raging inside the Reiner family for decades? To understand what happened that night, you have to go backward, far backward, before the blood, before the sirens, before the headlines. Because families like the Reiners don't implode overnight. They fracture slowly, quietly, behind closed doors, over dinners where no one finishes their food, over phone calls that end just a little too abruptly, over secrets that everyone knows exist, but no one is brave enough to name out loud. On the surface, the Reiners were Hollywood royalty. Rob Reiner, celebrated director, outspoken political voice, industry heavyweight. A man whose public image was built on principles, humor, and moral clarity. Michelle, fiercely protective, private, the emotional glue of the household. Friends often described her as the one who kept the temperature down when egos flared. Their children? Creative, intelligent, but quietly fractured. And that fracture matters. Because when investigators began interviewing extended family members, former assistants, and longtime friends after the murders, a pattern emerged. Not of violence, but of fear. Fear of confrontation. Fear of exposure. Fear of what would happen if certain conversations ever became public. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a family where everyone avoids the same topic, even though it sits in the room like a loaded weapon? That was the Reiner household. Let's start with Tracy. Tracy Reiner had always occupied a strange position in the family. Old enough to remember the early years of fame, young enough to see what it cost, connected to Hollywood, yet deliberately distant from its center. Friends described her as observant, quiet, meticulous, and most telling of all, prepared. She kept copies of things others threw away. Notes, letters, contracts, old recordings, not because she was paranoid, but because she believed history had a way of being rewritten by whoever controlled the narrative. And in Hollywood, narratives are currency. Tracy wasn't the loudest voice in the room. She didn't threaten. She didn't rant. She listened, which, as many investigators will tell you, can be far more dangerous. Then there was Nick. Nick Reiner grew up in the long shadow of expectation. Expectations he never quite fit into. Too sensitive for some. Too volatile for others. Brilliant one moment. Lost the next. Family insiders say he always felt there was something off about his upbringing. That he'd ask questions no one wanted to answer. Why were certain names never mentioned? Why did certain friends disappear? Why did his father insist on locking away old tapes instead of destroying them? As Nick got older, those questions didn't fade. They sharpened. And according to people close to him, they started to scare Michelle. Because Nick wasn't just curious. He was angry. Romy, on the other hand, was the emotional barometer of the family. Sensitive, intuitive, the first to notice when tension shifted in a room. Friends say Romy often felt like she was walking through a house full of glass. One wrong step, one wrong question, and everything could shatter. She knew something wasn't right long before that night. She just didn't know how bad it really was. Now here's where the story takes a darker turn. In the years leading up to the murders, Rob Reiner had reportedly become increasingly anxious about his legacy. Not creatively, but legally. He worried about reinterpretation, about old deals being misunderstood, about private negotiations being pulled out of context. According to one fictionalized source in this narrative, Rob once said, "History isn't written by the truth. It's written by whoever survives long enough to explain it." That sentence matters, because it reveals something crucial. Fear, not of guilt, but of loss of control. Several fictionalized accounts describe heated arguments between Rob and Michelle over what to do with the old material. Michelle allegedly believed it should be destroyed. Rob believed it should be preserved, under strict conditions. Nick believed it should be exposed. And Tracy? Tracy believed it should be protected until the right moment. For people, for philosophies, one secret, that's not a family, that's a pressure cooker. Now think back to the vault beneath Tracy's estate. Soundproofed, hidden, cataloged. That wasn't built in a week. That wasn't built on impulse. That was planned. And when investigators reviewed fictionalized property records, they noticed something unsettling. The vault wasn't constructed after Rob's retirement. It was built during the peak of his power, which raises an uncomfortable question. Why prepare a place to hide things when your career is thriving? Unless you already know. One day, someone will come looking. Here's another contradiction that keeps resurfacing. Rob Reiner publicly championed transparency, justice, and accountability. Privately, he was meticulous about documentation, confidentiality, and legal insulation. Those two things can coexist, but they don't always. And when they clash, someone pays the price. In the months before the murders, tensions reportedly escalated. Nick accused Rob of protecting monsters. Rob accused Nick of not understanding how the world works. Michelle begged them both to stop, and Tracy stayed silent. Until she didn't. Because here's the detail that most people overlook. Just 3 weeks before the murders, Tracy allegedly updated her estate's security system. Biometric locks, internal sensors, private backups. Why? And why did she do it without informing the rest of the family? Was she afraid of a break-in? Or was she afraid of something walking out? Now let me ask you this. If you were holding material powerful enough to destroy reputations, if your own family was fighting over what to do with it, and if one person in that family was growing increasingly unstable, wouldn't you start preparing for the worst? Wouldn't you start building safeguards? And wouldn't you worry what might happen if someone decided to force the truth out? By the time of the murders, the Reiner family wasn't just divided. They were polarized. Nick wanted exposure. Rob wanted control. Michelle wanted peace. And Tracy wanted time. Time to decide when the truth should surface. Time to decide who it would protect and who it would destroy. But time is the one thing they no longer had. Because according to fictionalized investigative timelines, something happened just 48 hours before the murders. A meeting, an argument, a threat. Details remain unclear, but one thing is consistent across accounts. Whatever was said that day changed everything. And when police later reviewed the fictionalized call logs from that week, one number stood out. A call placed from Tracy's estate to the Brentwood house. Duration, 11 minutes. No recording, no transcript, just silence. So now we circle back to the question that won't go away. Was the night of the murders an explosion of emotion? Or the final act of a long-running internal war over secrets that were never meant to see the light of day? Because in the next chapter, we'll move away from motives and into something far more concrete. The moment federal agents stepped into the hidden underground room. The moment theory turned into evidence. And the moment everyone realized this was bigger than the Reiners. What if the most dangerous secrets weren't buried 6 feet under, but 12 feet beneath a movie legend's daughter's estate, behind a wall no blueprint dared to show? It began with a whisper, not a hard lead. Not a tip that came through official channels. Not even an anonymous voicemail. Just a whisper. A quiet warning. A single sentence allegedly passed to an FBI contact. You need to look beneath Tracy's house. She knows everything. At first, it sounded ridiculous. Tabloid bait. Conspiracy theory nonsense. Tracy Reiner? The quiet one? The level-headed one? What could she possibly be hiding? But when agents cross-checked that whisper against a few unusual financial moves, an unlisted renovation permit, a silent land survey, an unusually high electricity consumption spike, they paused. And then they acted. Because the whisper wasn't just a rumor. It was a key. A key to a vault no one outside the Reiner family was ever meant to find. Let's rewind to the day of the raid. 3 days after Rob and Michelle Reiner were murdered, FBI agents, accompanied by a forensic team, arrived at Tracy Reiner's sprawling estate in the hills of Santa Barbara. The official line? A property check. A follow-up in light of Nick Reiner's arrest. The reality? A sealed federal warrant to search for unauthorized possession of classified material. A phrase that sends shivers down the spine of any agent in the bureau. At first, everything appeared normal. Grand entryway. Tastefully minimalist interior. No visible red flags. The staff was cooperative. Tracy wasn't home. But when agents asked to see the basement, things got strange. The head housekeeper said flatly, "There is no basement." But there was. Because a decade-old inspection report, buried deep in the city's archive, mentioned a lower-level utility space. Never remodeled. Never reassessed. So where did it go? An agent walked the perimeter. Nothing. Then they stepped into the wine cellar. A modest room. Too modest. Square footage didn't match the blueprint. The wall was too thick. The back corner felt too hollow. It started with a light knock. Then another. A slight echo. One agent leaned in. Felt a draft. He pushed. The wall gave way. Just slightly. Behind it, plastered dust. Reinforced steel. A biometric panel. A keypad. And beyond that, silence. Cold, humming silence. Let me ask you something. Why would someone install a hidden biometric lock in their own home, then erase it from all public records? Who was this meant to keep out? Or more chillingly, who was it meant to keep in? With a portable generator powering their tools, agents bypassed the system after several failed scan attempts. The door groaned open. Behind it, a narrow staircase descending at a sharp angle. Concrete walls. Smooth, windowless. Every step echoing with tension. And then the room. Roughly 600 square feet. No windows. No vents. No signal. Soundproofed panels lined every wall. 3 ceiling-mounted LED panels cast a cold, sterile glow over a series of custom-built shelves and locked file drawers. And at the center of the room, a heavy metal table, bolted to the floor. On top of the table, a reel-to-reel tape machine. Still running. Recording. Imagine the look on those agents' faces. You're expecting to find maybe a stash of cash. A panic room. A vault of old Hollywood memorabilia. Instead, you find an active recording device. Paper files labeled with code names. Court documents with redacted lines. USB drives. External hard drives marked with symbols, not names. And then you see it. The seal. Stamped on the cover of a manila folder. Classified. Restricted access. Do not copy. It wasn't a Hollywood prop. It was real. Official. Governmental. The kind of file that belongs in a secure federal archive, not beneath a movie producer's wine cellar. The first drawer was pried open. Inside, folders dating back to the late 90s. Settlement agreements. Names that had appeared in the press before, but never in the same document. Never side by side. Never this connected. Some names were household names. Others, shadows. Industry insiders. Lawyers. Lobbyists. Producers. And then there were the recordings. Each reel labeled by date. And voice. One reel simply said, RR/JP, 2008, Sunset. RR. Rob Reiner? JP? Industry speculation is still catching up. But here's what makes your stomach turn. The tape they walked in on was still recording ambient sound, meaning someone had accessed that room recently. Very recently. How recently? Agents reviewed the hidden motion sensors in the floor. Only 3 entries in the last year. One of them, 4 days before the murder. The same day Nick allegedly confronted Rob at the Brentwood estate. Now let that sink in. Did Nick know about the room? Had he been down there? Or did someone else lead him to it? And if so, who? Now here's where the contradictions start piling up. Neighbors told authorities they never saw trucks. Never heard construction. Never noticed any building beneath the house. So how was it built? Well, property records suggest the land was purchased during the height of the COVID-19 lockdowns, when inspections were limited and privacy was easier to maintain. Clever? Absolutely. Suspicious? Terrifying. Because someone used that time to bury something. Not metaphorically. Literally. One of the more chilling finds? A folder labeled Sunset Clause, DNR. Inside, a letter. Handwritten. Dated 5 years ago. It read, "If anything happens to Rob, or if Nick opens his mouth, this file is to be delivered to redacted. We agreed this would be the insurance policy. Burn after delivery." Burn after delivery? Who writes that? Outside of spy novels or paranoid tycoons? And who was the file meant to protect? Rob? Or the people he made deals with? The room wasn't just a vault. It was a monument to paranoia. Legal paranoia. Every file was cross-referenced. Some had sticky notes with phrases like pending lawsuit, silent NDA, revisit in 10, and, most disturbing, already paid. And in a drawer marked simply Tracy, originals, were several unfiled documents, all typed, all unsigned, but clearly meant for release. Titles included The Real Cost of Silence, When Justice is Delayed, Confessions of a Fixer's Daughter. Confessions? Of what? Of whom? And why was Tracy preparing these files, only to keep them locked in the same place? Was she planning to leak them? To sell them? To use them? Or was she too scared to decide? The final twist? Tucked behind a drawer panel was a small, velvet-covered box. Inside, a USB drive. Plugged into a field laptop by investigators later that evening, the contents sent a chill through the room. Hundreds of documents, thousands of pages, and a folder titled Epstein Link Draft. Its contents? Still under review, still sealed, still classified, but the FBI has confirmed this much. Some of the names listed in that draft match names from other high-profile investigations that have gone cold. Very cold. So now we must ask, was this room built as a vault of justice? Or a bunker of blackmail? Was Tracy trying to protect her father's legacy or hold him accountable? And most disturbingly, was the murder of Rob and Michelle Reiner a panicked effort to stop those secrets from ever leaving this room? Because what the agents found next, buried even deeper beneath the concrete tiles, was a second compartment, smaller, more discreet. Inside it, one item, a loaded handgun, unregistered, with a single word etched into the grip, Romy. And that changed everything, because it meant someone knew their time was running out, and someone else was being warned. What happens next? It starts with that single name, because in Chapter 4, we open the folders and discover what was inside those classified documents. The kind that do get people killed. What happens when a vault meant to silence becomes a time bomb, and every file inside it could bring Hollywood to its knees? The room was cold, sterile, unwelcoming. But the files? They were fire. Each folder, each document, each label whispered danger. Not because of what they contained, but because of what they confirmed. This wasn't speculation. It was proof. The kind of proof that didn't just challenge reputations, it could destroy them. And at the center of it all sat Tracy Reiner. Or more specifically, the life she had quietly built, document by document, beneath her estate. Let's walk through what the FBI found, shall we? Because behind that biometric vault wasn't just a storage room. It was a reckoning chamber. Folder 1. Confidential, Sunset Agreements, 2006 to 2009. The first file investigators opened bore a label that made them pause. Sunset Agreements? The term sounded innocuous, but inside was a collection of sealed contracts, heavily redacted, mostly boilerplate. But one detail stood out. A subclause, handwritten, titled, Delayed Disbursement Pending Reputational Review. What did that mean? Simply put, money would only be paid if certain information didn't come out. Think about that. Not a gag order. A conditional payoff. Keep quiet, get paid. Speak up, lose everything. One agreement named only by initials, RR and MC, included language about an off-site arrangement and project abandonment due to press complications. Another had a section on asset liquidation in exchange for long-term immunity from prosecution. And buried in the appendix, a list of risk categories. Red, yellow, black, names beside them. One of them, T. Reiner. Yes, Tracy. Her name wasn't just on the folders. She was being tracked. Was she a threat or an insider? Folder 2, Media Control, Strategic Planning Files. Inside this was a PR strategist's nightmare, or perhaps their dream, if you're morally flexible. Internal memos discussing major Hollywood news stories. But here's the twist. These weren't responses to the stories. They were plans before the stories broke. It read like a script for real-world manipulation. Coordinate anonymous source to frame event as unrelated accident. Offer exclusive to redacted in exchange for delaying coverage. Deploy emotional distraction story within 12 to 24 hours. Each file linked to an event that, on the surface, seemed random. A scandal that vanished too quickly. A name that disappeared mid-lawsuit. A story that was never followed up. Now the receipts were here. And the timestamps proved one thing. They knew ahead of time. Folder 3, Legal Settlements, Special Category. This one required clearance. Only 3 people had it. One was Rob Reiner. Another was never identified. The third, a Hollywood fixer known only by the alias Monarch. In this folder were 17 settlements, undisclosed, untraceable, paid out via third-party LLCs routed through Belize, Malta, and, shockingly, a family-run trust based in Palm Springs. The files described various incidents: verbal coercion during production, inappropriate conduct at fundraiser, violation of minor confidentiality clause. Some were marked resolved, others awaiting silence. Let me repeat that, awaiting silence, meaning the payoff hadn't been delivered yet because the target hadn't shut up. USB 3, Vault audio extracts, H&E only. This wasn't a document. It was a nightmare on repeat. Dozens of MP3s, titled by date and voice. The first file FBI techs opened, labeled RR_July 17.mp3. Rob and Tracy. The conversation began calmly, but quickly turned. Rob, you don't know what you're doing. Tracy, I know exactly what I'm doing. I kept them safe. You buried them. Rob, I protected this family. I kept it alive. Tracy, no, you kept it quiet. There's a difference. Then silence. Then Rob again, his voice strained. If you open that vault, you destroy more than me. You burn everything down. You know that, right? She didn't respond. That was the end of the clip. Let me ask you, what kind of father says that to his daughter? What kind of daughter records it? And why store it in a vault unless you're waiting for something to happen? Folder 4, Epstein link draft. Yes, that name. Here's the shocker. No confirmation of meetings. No photographs. No travel logs. But there were emails. Dozens of draft correspondences between unnamed Hollywood figures, legal teams, and one finance manager connected to a now-defunct Caribbean bank, all surrounding the year 2008. The same year a now-infamous party took place in New Mexico. Were the Reiners there? Not definitively, but one message, marked in red, referenced a payment to ensure silence about Malibu property rendezvous. It was signed, RR. Another internal memo mentioned, TR inquiry. Don't let this go public. Tracy? Did she try to expose it? Or was she warned? Either way, the contents of the Epstein link folder aren't just damning. They're explosive, and they're still being withheld from the public. For now. Folder 5, Romy, contingency plan. This one hit differently. It was a single document. A letter, written by Tracy, dated 2021, addressed to her niece. It read, "If you're reading this, I failed. But you can still choose differently. Burn the tapes. Or play them. Either way, do it knowing what this cost." There was no signature, just a fingerprint, and a post-it note that read, "Ask the tunnel." The tunnel. Yes, there was a tunnel beneath the house. Old. Sealed from the inside. But that's chapter 5. Let's stay in the vault for now. Because the last thing investigators found before sealing the room again was a black hard drive labeled Final Cut, Trace Release. Inside, a video, timestamped 6 months before the murders. A monologue. Tracy, sitting at the metal table, looking directly at the camera. She says, "This isn't revenge. It's truth. But the truth doesn't care who it hurts. That's why everyone's afraid of it." She takes a deep breath. If you're watching this, it means someone finally chose to stop lying. Cut to black. No credits. No music. No edits. Just truth. Raw. Brutal. Waiting. Let me ask you this. If Tracy had all this, proof of silenced victims, coerced payoffs, secrets that could collapse careers, why hold it? Why wait? Why build a vault instead of going public? Was she afraid? Or was she waiting for the right moment? Or the right price? And did someone, maybe even Rob himself, realize she couldn't be controlled anymore? Because what this room revealed wasn't just scandal. It revealed intent. Meticulous. Measured. Unforgiving. And now the vault is open. And the next question is, what did Hollywood do when it realized the dam had broken? Because in chapter 5, the web of silence stretches far beyond the Reiners. It leads straight to the people who made the silence possible. And when the tapes start to roll, no one can hide. What if the truth buried beneath Tracy Reiner's estate wasn't just about her family, but about an entire industry built on silence, sealed rooms, and whispered payoffs. There's a reason the vault scared people, not because of what was in it, but because of who was in it. Because once the FBI began cross-referencing names, dates, and locations, they saw a pattern emerge. And it didn't stop with the Reiners. It reached directors, executives, billionaire producers, political donors, film festival board members, private studio backers. It traced a spiderweb across Hollywood that, until now, had only been suspected. The kind of web that's been hinted at in scandals, but never fully mapped. Until now. Let's start with one name, Project C. That was the code used in multiple emails and settlement folders inside the vault. At first, no one knew what it meant. But a forensic tech noticed something odd. The label only showed up in documents dated between 2011 to 2014 and always appeared next to massive payouts ranging from $750,000 to $4 million. The memo headers were vague. Unexpected exposure. Remedy required. Unauthorized disclosure to junior production team. Subject misinterpreted protocol. Offer restitution plus silence clause. One particularly chilling entry included a note from an unnamed party. Get ahead of it. If they talk, we all burn. Remind them about the India tape. India tape? No one in the FBI could place it. Not yet. But then one of the names tied to Project C appeared on another document. A former child actor turned high-profile director, publicly praised for championing diversity and mental health in the industry. Privately, he was on 2 of the sealed NDAs. The terms? Emotional coercion. Inappropriate offers made during mentorship program. No physical contact confirmed. But the payout? $1.2 million. Why pay that much if nothing happened? That's the question agents kept asking. Over and over again. And then came the kicker. The list. Yes, that list. A spreadsheet buried in an encrypted hard drive labeled, contains legacy links, do not duplicate. Dozens of names. All organized in categories. Risk 1, compliant. Risk 2, agitated. Risk 3, volatile. Risk 4, likely to go public. Next to each name, a date, a dollar amount, and a final column titled Handled. Most said, yes. 2 said, TBD. 1 said, escalating. Flag, immediately. That name was Rob Reiner. Let that sit for a moment. Romy wasn't even involved in any of the legal settlements. But she was flagged. Why? Because someone in the system believed she might talk. About what? That's what Chapter 6 will reveal. But here, in Chapter 5, let's stay focused on the machine. Because this was a machine. A coordinated system of payouts, reputational rescues, and reputation assassinations. And it all functioned with one core principle. Silence is survival. Enter the fixers. If you've ever wondered how major scandals disappear overnight, how accused figures walk into awards shows untouched, it's because of them. They don't wear badges. They don't carry guns. But they control the narrative. The vault contained multiple internal memos between fixers hired by elite PR firms and in-house legal counsel. Here's one real quote pulled from a fictionalized internal brief. Minimize exposure. Create emotional misdirection. Deploy sympathy narrative. Leak unrelated minor scandal to redirect. Sound familiar? You've seen it. We all have. A rising actor suddenly accused of something, but the press runs a story about their tragic childhood instead. A director under investigation, but the only headlines are about their new charity. This isn't accidental. It's manufactured. And the Reiners? They weren't just clients. According to the vault, they were funders. Multiple wire transfers from a holding company labeled Golden Echo LLC were found inside a folder titled Operational Disbursement Logs. These weren't small donations. We're talking 6 figures per month. Steady. Routine. Protected by layers of shell companies. One transfer, dated just 2 weeks before the murders, was for $185,000. The memo line? Q2 neutralization strategy. Neutralize who? That part was blacked out. But one email in the chain revealed more than it intended. From Fixer Echo to RR Legal Team. Subject: Sunset Prep. Body: we're monitoring the journalist. His sister's job is still vulnerable. That angle may buy us time. Romy, contain if possible. She's not part of Sunset. Read that again. She's not part of Sunset. So what was Sunset? A code name for a broader operation? A pact? An insider's network? Because multiple documents labeled Sunset 2.0 showed efforts to renegotiate deals with newer studios, streaming platforms, and independent film funds. This wasn't just cleaning up the past. It was securing the future. Let me pause and ask you. If you discovered that an entire generation of Hollywood power players had collaborated to suppress victims, silence dissenters, and stage-manage reality for over 20 years, what would you do? Would you believe it? Would you expose it? Or would you run? Because Tracy didn't run. She built a vault, and she filled it with every receipt she could get her hands on. One entry from her personal folder is particularly chilling. It's a journal page. No title, just a single handwritten line. They called it Sunset, but it was always a blackout. Here's the contradiction that keeps investigators awake at night. If Tracy had this material, and she clearly feared for Romy, why didn't she act sooner? Was she being watched? Was she trying to broker a deal? Or was she waiting for the right person to open the vault? Was she trying to frame someone? Because another name appears repeatedly in emails flagged Trace Watch. Nick Reiner. And here's the wild part. In one email, a fixer warns, if he finds the vault, all bets are off. Keep him medicated. Distract with new script funding. So, was Nick dangerous because of who he was? Or because of what he was about to find? The deeper the FBI dug, the more they saw how far this went. A producer tied to 3 Oscar-winning films? On the list. A former studio exec turned politician? On the list. A celebrity known for activism and philanthropy? Funded 2 fixers. And most horrifying of all, 2 former child stars, now reclusive, had files labeled "Do Not Pursue," high-risk suicidal. This wasn't just a cleanup operation. It was a war against the truth. And for years, the truth lost. But now, the vault is open. The tapes are in custody. And Tracy? She's either the bravest woman in Hollywood or the most dangerous. Because one question still lingers. Did she collect all of this to expose her family's sins? Or to control everyone else's? Because what's more powerful than the truth? Owning the truth before anyone else can tell it. And in Chapter 6, we finally hear the tapes. The ones that were never meant to be played outside that vault. The ones where voices crack. Where secrets become confessions. And where one voice, familiar, calm, says, if this ever gets out, it's over for all of us. What if the most incriminating voice wasn't a whistleblower, but the one you trusted most? They weren't labeled evidence. They weren't labeled confession. They were simply labeled tapes. Row after row, stacked in cases, dated, indexed by initials, and stored like forgotten relics. But when the FBI began playing them, one by one, they didn't find nostalgia. They found leverage. Because inside those reels were voices. Real voices. No edits. No deniability. Just raw, unfiltered power. And the very first tape that played shook the investigation to its core. It was dated October 7th, 2013. The label, RRMG Lounge. Rob Reiner /MG, believed to be a prominent studio head. The location? Likely Tracy's estate, or possibly Rob's Brentwood study, based on ambient sound signatures. It starts light, joking, clinking glasses, 2 friends catching up. Then Rob says, I just need this one handled, Mike. Quietly. She's not even pushing for money yet, but you know how fast that changes. Mike responds, we'll offer something preemptive, something emotional. By her therapy, not silence. Makes us look like saints. Laughter. Rob. And if she talks? Mike. We'll call it a miscommunication. Hell, we'll leak that she was obsessed. That always works. That moment marked the first official confirmation of narrative manipulation from Rob's own mouth. Not in a public statement, not in a court deposition, but in a private conversation recorded and hidden by Tracy. And that's where the true horror begins. Because Tracy didn't just collect evidence. She recorded her family. Intentionally. Methodically. One reel was titled, RRTR, Kitchen Argument. The audio is tense. Forks clinking. Someone pacing. Rob's voice sharp. You had no right. That room was for emergency purposes. Tracy calm. Emergency is when the truth's about to be buried alive, and I'm the last person holding a shovel. Rob, you think you're noble? You're just a hoarder of secrets. Tracy, no. I'm the only one in this family who's not afraid of them. The sound of a door slamming. End of tape. There were over 60 tapes with Rob's voice alone. Some were harmless. Conversations about film projects, scheduling. But others? They were devastating. Like the one marked, RR Legal Team, Sunset Strategy. In it, Rob lays out, in disturbingly cold terms, how to contain a lawsuit involving a young assistant. We deny, delay, then offer a role on the next project with a bigger title. No one sues when they're promoted. You can hear a lawyer chuckling. You can also hear Tracy breathing, faint, in the background. She was recording from the next room. The tapes weren't just about Rob. There were recordings with names we won't say here. But they are names you know. Voices discussing payouts, threats, even a conversation about a ghost-ridden victim statement to be handed to press if things got messy. One unsettling tape involved a fixer known as Monarch. In it, he says, the trick isn't to stop the story. It's to change the frame. Get them to feel bad for the monster. Then he adds, we make the predator a victim. Works every time. That voice was confirmed by AI-enhanced audio tech. The man behind it? Still walking red carpets today. Let's talk about Tracy again. Because the question still echoes. Why record all this? Was it protection? Was it revenge? One tape offers a clue. Titled, TR Journal Entry, December 12, 2020. It's not a conversation. Just her voice. She sounds tired. Fragile. Tracy, I can't tell if I'm building a case or building a cage. Maybe both. Maybe that's what daughters of powerful men do. We collect the pieces, hoping one day someone will ask the right question. Then she whispers something barely audible. They only listen after the damage is done. Click. End of entry. The tapes turned the investigation upside down. Because documents are deniable. But voices? They carry emotion, guilt, intent. You can hear the moment someone realizes they've crossed a line. You can hear the silence after a threat, the stammer before a confession. These weren't people talking about cover-ups. They were planning them. Now here's where it gets more twisted. One reel had been erased, but FBI forensics recovered partial data. The file, in our basement too. Rob and Nick. A conversation believed to have taken place weeks before the murders. Only fragments remain. Nick, you think I don't know what you did? You think just because you buried it, it can't rot its way out. Rob, you don't understand. I kept us safe. I made it go away. For you, Nick. Nick, you didn't do it for me. You did it so you wouldn't drown. Static. Screeching. End of data. Let that settle in. Nick knew. And he was angry. Angry enough to confront Rob. Angry enough to demand truth. But not angry enough to kill. That's still unclear. One final tape had the label, RR Final Confession. It was sealed in a separate envelope, only to be opened in event of my death, according to a note in Tracy's handwriting. Inside, Rob's voice, tired, raspy, unedited. If you're listening, I guess it's over. You found the room. You found the pieces. Maybe you hate me. Maybe you understand. But what you have to realize is, I wasn't the only one. I was never the only one. This town is built on silence. And we all paid the price to stay quiet. You want justice? Good luck finding it. Justice doesn't live here anymore. Then he laughs. Softly. Bitterly. If it ever did. Now imagine sitting in that room. Listening. To your father. To your past. To an empire of shadows unraveling at your feet. That's what Tracy preserved. Not just memories. But indictments. Not just voices. But motives. So now we ask again. Was this a vault of evidence? Or a weapon waiting to be fired? And was Tracy planning to use it? Or was someone else trying to use it against her? Because here's the final detail from tape 61. The last reel. Blank label. No date. But when played, it began with footsteps. Then whispering. Then a click. And one final voice saying, they're getting too close. We don't need her alive. End of tape. And that changes everything. Because in Chapter 7, we uncover how much Tracy Reiner really knew. What she did next. And why the legal hammer came crashing down on her. What happens when the keeper of secrets becomes the suspect? And what if her silence wasn't protection, but premeditation? The public still doesn't know what to make of her. To some, Tracy Reiner is a whistleblower, quietly collecting truths no one else dared to preserve. To others, she's a co-conspirator, shielded for decades by a family name, now finally caught in the blast radius of her father's undoing. But one thing is clear. Tracy Reiner knew. and she knew for a long time. The question is, what did she do with what she knew? And why did the FBI suddenly pivot from treating her like a witness to slapping her with felony charges? Let's break it down. We begin with a timeline. May 2017. Tracy allegedly purchases the Santa Barbara estate through a Delaware-based shell corporation. On paper, it's a normal sale, but the mortgage was paid in full, immediately, by a private trust linked to a now-dissolved production company once affiliated with her father. Strange. Not illegal. Not yet. But then comes July 2018. A building permit is filed, not by Tracy, but by her estate manager. The permit references foundation reinforcement and utility expansion. No one questions it. The county is buried in backlog from wildfire damages. What no one notices, the floor plan quietly shifts. A lower-level storage area is added for archival purposes. Now we know that was the vault. October 2019. Tracy allegedly begins compiling audio tapes. Journal entries recovered from the vault show daily notes like, TRR, tense again today. He asked if I was recording. NR wants access. I told him it's not time. Romy saw the hallway panel. Told her it's for wine. She doesn't believe me. This is where investigators believe Tracy crossed a line. Because she wasn't just archiving. She was curating, selecting, categorizing, preparing. That's not defense. That's strategy. Let's talk about the files titled Sunset Contingency. These weren't accident files. They weren't old family junk. They were indexed dossiers on people, allies, enemies, victims, threats, each with a risk level, each with a leverage note, each with a preferred narrative outcome. That sounds less like a concerned daughter and more like a quiet operator in a long game of power preservation. And that's exactly what federal prosecutors are arguing. January 2020. A folder marked NR, Instability Escalates, is added to the system. In it, a transcript of Nick Reiner's text messages to Tracy. A screenshot of an email Nick sent Rob with the subject line, "You don't deserve to die with this secret." A memo Tracy typed to herself, "He's too close. May need to accelerate exposure." What does that mean? What did she mean by accelerate exposure? Was she planning to release something publicly? Or worse, was she baiting Nick into becoming the fall guy? Let's not forget, the knife used to kill Rob and Michelle? It wasn't a regular kitchen knife. It was a ceremonial blade from a gift set Rob received in 2011. And where was that set stored? In Tracy's house, in a case marked "Do Not Remove" for display only. Yet one knife was missing and never returned. And guess who was at the house the week before the murders? Nick. The question is, did he take it? Or did someone make sure he found it? That's what prosecutors are now examining. Because according to new testimony, Tracy and Romy had a meeting 48 hours before the murders. They met at a cafe. No phones. No bags. Just the two of them. Witnesses describe intense, hushed discussion. And afterward, Tracy drove straight back to her estate, where surveillance logs confirm she entered the vault, alone, for over 2 hours. What was she doing? Organizing? Deleting? Or, according to the FBI, printing copies? Because several files found in Nick's guest house after the murders match documents from her archive, including one titled RR Project Monarch, Strategic Memos 2013 to 2014. Nick should not have had that, unless someone gave it to him. Let's talk about the charges. Tracy Reiner was formally arrested and indicted on the following counts. Obstruction of justice, for withholding audio and written evidence during an active homicide investigation. Tampering with federal evidence, for editing files and removing USB drives before the vault was secured. Possession of classified materials without authorization, multiple documents bore seals that belong to federal archives. Conspiracy to interfere with a federal investigation, new, and most damning. Because that last one, it's connected to a person we haven't talked about yet. A former studio executive who visited Tracy's estate just 3 weeks before the murders. His name is redacted in court filings, but his presence isn't. Tracy's estate had motion-activated camera logs, and he was seen walking into the vault hallway, alone. No permission, no warrant, no trace. So what did Tracy think would happen? According to her legal team, she's innocent. She claims the vault was a family archive, and that the recordings were part of a personal documentation project. That would be believable, If she hadn't encrypted them. If she hadn't hidden the room. If she hadn't hired private security consultants to install 3 biometric layers, none of which she disclosed to investigators. Oh, and let's not forget the letter she wrote, found on her desk the day of her arrest. The truth is ugly, but it's not mine to beautify. That's not a denial. That's a confession dressed as a quote. Let me ask you, if you were trying to protect your family from implosion, would you build a vault? Would you record them without consent?